Okay, we did it. We did it. I believe that we are live on both YouTube and on Facebook. Although I'm not sure why, long time to load, but we're here. Let's begin with a short prayer. Who this class is dedicated in the honor of the refuah shleim of a number of people that I know that unfortunately have the coronavirus. Let us begin by saying that today's class is dedicated in the schus and the merit and the honor of Malka Zelda Basliba, as well as Rav Shalom Dev ben Rachel Bela, Menachem Mendel ben Sarah, Pinchas ben Chai Rivka, Levi ben Chana Priva, Zev Yecheskel HaKoyin ben Mindel, and if there's anyone else whose names I don't know who are in need of a refuah shleima, God should bless them and heal them very, very quickly. And the power and the holiness and the spiritual energy of our learning tonight to be able to elevate them all for a complete, absolute refuah shleima, complete healing, and only good things. In addition, I want to give a happy birthday to my daughter Mushka. Tonight is my daughter, today rather, we're still in today's birthday of my daughter, of Mushka. Unfortunately, we did not get to have the party that she had been looking forward to and had planned and wanted to have. She wanted to go out for dinner with us, and my wife and I have that quality time together. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. Her party didn't happen. We had today, last night, I taped up balloons all over her room so that at least when she woke up, she saw the celebration. And of course, we had a party today. My wife did an amazing job making it as beautiful a day as it can. And so today's class is also in her honor, and it is close that she should have a year of health and happiness and good things. Okay, with that being said, we are ready to begin tonight's lesson. I decided to talk about matzah tonight, and I'll tell you why. Because I want to follow a structure, and God willing, tomorrow night's class will actually not be me. It will be Dr. Sandra Lilienthal, a very well known speaker, a very I was going to say interesting, but it's more interesting. A very talented person who truly has a very beautiful and unique perspective that I can share. And she was scheduled to be giving a two-part series here at Chabad. She already gave the first class last week, and although it was it was a lecture she was charging for, etc. I asked her that in light of the circumstances and the fact that we're trying to do everything we can to be here for the community, if she'll be willing to allow it to go public on Facebook, and she did. And so tomorrow night, same time, instead of seeing me, if you're getting a little bored of me, you'll get to see someone else. She will be talking about the 15 steps of the Seder. So because I want to continue in the order and I wanted to go through those 15 steps, I'm going to let her go through those 15 steps tomorrow. I instead will talk about one of the most important, most beautiful, and most meaningful parts of the Seder, and something very important that it's good to know, which is the matzah that we eat on. Of course, we have to begin with a joke, right? What would life be if we couldn't joke at least a little bit? So I share with you a joke, a story we'll make it contemporary. I shared with my kids up at the dinner table a half hour ago. So my wife made it a little bit more contemporary. This man is in quarantine and he's all alone. And whatever, someone sticks under the door. There's a blind man. They stick under the door food for him, some matzah. And the blind man quarantine gets the matzah, and he's feeling it, and he's feeling it, he's feeling it, trying to figure out what it is. And finally, he calls out through the door, and he says, "Tell me, who in the world wrote this stuff? Who wrote this stuff?" Let's talk tonight about the matzah. I want to start with a question. Because if Jews don't start with a joke, then they start with a question. Manashtana, we did a question. I'm asking you, why do we eat matzah? Why do we eat matzah? Please, if you're on Facebook or on YouTube, you can write a comment. Share with me why you think. What is it in your mind? Do you think is the reason why we eat matzah? If you don't publicly, think about it for a moment. Maybe write it down on a little index card or on the napkin that's in front of you on your dining room table or wherever you're watching this. Why do we sit by the Seder table? Yesterday we talked about the Seder plate, and underneath the Seder plate, most important part are the three matzos that we eat. Just a few short body ideas, basic ideas about the matzah. Just explain the ritual, how we eat the matzah before we get into the meaning and the spiritual soul I want to talk about. So there's three matzahs on the Seder plate. The Haggadah is said with all three there, but most of the Haggadah is said with the middle one broken, right? The beginning of the Seder, we break Yachatz, we break the middle matzah. The larger part is hidden for the Afikomen, and the smaller part is kept as the poor man's bread on the table. It's uncovered during many parts of the Haggadah that we recite. The middle broken matzah is uncovered. When we make the blessing, Hamotzi, after we finish reading the whole Haggadah, and we're making the blessing, so we hold all three matzahs for the first blessing. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech olam hamotzi lechem min haaretz, holding all three matzahs. Then we let go of the bottom matzah, and we're holding only the middle broken matzah and the top complete matzah. And we make the second matzah, the second blessing, which is the blessing Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat matzah. The blessing we say, thank you God for giving us this mitzvah, this commandment to eat the matzah. The reason why we hold all three in the beginning is because when you make the blessing hamotzi, you want to have two whole complete matzahs. Just like on Friday night we have two whole challahs, you want to have two whole matzahs for the blessing. But when we're making the blessing on the matzah, we're going to eat the top and the middle matzah. When we do the mitzvah eating matzah, it's the top and the middle. And later, when we do the sandwich, the korech, that will be from the bottom matzah. That's just some details that are important to know for how you conduct the Seder. First blessing, all three. Second blessing, top and middle one. When we eat the matzah to fulfill the mitzvah, we eat the top, a little bit of the top and a little bit of the middle one. And the bottom one is used for the sandwich that's done after the mark. It is very, very important, that the matzah that you make this blessing on, and the matzah that you eat in order to fulfill the mitzvah of eating matzah is not machine matzah that you can buy, Yehuda matzah, wherever you buy at Walmart. It must be shmura matzah. Shmura matzah means that it was guarded, it was watched by a Jew to ensure that the matzah never came into contact, the flour, the wheat actually never came into contact with the water. But besides that, it was protected and watched in the process. Shmura matzah means that it's, in today's context anyway, that it's a handmade process where the matzah was made for the sake of fulfilling the mitzvah, something which, according to many halachic authorities, cannot be done with a machine. Although there's a big debate about this, and it's totally not the topic of tonight's class. I'm only trying to share the basic ideas, but in at least the way we perceive the mitzvah, it must be fulfilled with matzah that was made by a person by hand. In addition, as we're going to talk about soon, besides for the halachic technical issue, if a machine can have kavana, can have intention to make matzah for the sake of a mitzvah, more importantly than that is the spiritual aspect of the matzah, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. And this spiritual aspect of the mitzvah cannot be done with machine matzah. It has to be done with the real handmade matzah. Matzah, as I'm going to discuss tonight, in Zohar, in Kabbalah, called Michla de Mehemenusa, is called bread of faith. On the first night, the matzah is called the Michla de Mehemenusa, the bread of faith. And the matzah of the second night of Pesach is called the Michla, the bread of healing. So this matzah is critical to eat because this is the matzah that restores and rejuvenates the faith of a Jew, as we shall explain, God willing, Bezrat Hashem tonight. And it's the matzah which gives us healing. We live in a time where we need healing more than ever before. Healing is critical. And therefore, since we need healing, it's very, very important to have the real matzah. You could buy the matzah in any of the Judaica stores, the kosher stores. They're all selling matzah. I understand that Costco is selling matzah. In addition, I just got yesterday to secure a shipment down to Florida that should be coming. I'm not sure exactly when. I understand that Costco is selling matzah. In addition, I just got yesterday to secure a shipment down to Florida that should be coming. I'm not sure exactly when. I'll have pounds of matzah available for purchase for $18 a pound, etc. Please make sure you have proper matzah. So now that you had a moment to think about this, to think about the question, why is it that on the Pesach Seder we eat matzah? What do you think? So many people will tell you because the dough didn't have a chance to rise before we left Egypt, which is true. And when we left Egypt, the Jewish people did not give the story goes that when we left Egypt, we were in such a rush, we were in such a state of panic and hurry that the dough didn't have a chance to rise. And therefore, because the dough didn't have a chance to rise, to remember what our forefathers ate in Egypt, we too eat the matzah that they ate then. However, let's open up a Chumash. Let's look in the Torah and let's see what is actually written over there. Now, I am going to try and post a comment over here. No, I'm going to try doing it first on Facebook and then on one second on YouTube. Okay, so if you're watching this, I've just posted into Facebook as a comment the text that I want to read, and in over here we'll do it as well. One second. Ideally, I would have like a Zoom class or something. We'll be able to put the text in front of you. I'm going to read it anyway, just so you have it. Okay, let me go back to our live stream here. Okay, I posted it. I don't know if I went through it or not, but I posted it. Now, let's see, what does it say? Verse number 7. This is from chapter 12, from the book of Shemos, the book of Exodus. These verses are the verses that God tells Moshe to tell the Jewish people before the Exodus. You all know the story. God comes to Moshe on Rosh Chodesh, on the first day of the month of Nisan, and God tells Moshe, I want you to tell the Jewish people to prepare themselves. They should take a lamb, they should tie it to their bedposts, they should examine it, and on the 14th day of the month of Nisan, they should slaughter this lamb while they're still in Egypt, which, by the way, the sheep is the idol of the Egyptian people. They should take this animal, they should slaughter it, they should take the blood and put it on a doorpost, right? You all remember that? On the inside of the doorpost, they should take that Pesach offering, that sheep that they slaughtered, and they should sit and have a Pesach Seder in their homes together with their families while they are still sitting as slaves in Egypt. And then after that, God said, I will come and I will save all, I will kill all the Egyptian firstborns and take out the Jewish firstborns. Chapter 12, I'm starting from verse number 7. And they shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and on the lintel, on the houses in which they will eat this Pesach offering. And on this night, if you're looking in the comments, you can read what I wrote. And on this night, they shall eat the flesh roasted over the fire and unleavened matzos with bitter herbs. They shall eat it. So we already see a commandment from God that the Jewish people should eat matzah together with the maror and together with the Pesach meat, the offering, on the night before the Exodus. The Torah describes it. They'll eat it, and they should slaughter it, and this is how you should eat it. Verse number 11. Your loins girded, meaning with your belt on, ready to travel, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is a Passover sacrifice to the Lord. And then God says, I will pass through the land of Egypt on this night, and I will smite every firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. And upon all the gods of Egypt will I wreak judgments. I am the Lord. And the blood will be for you a sign upon the doorposts where you will be. And I will see the blood, and I will skip over you. And there will be no plague to destroy you when I smite the people of the land of Egypt. Verse 14, listen to this verse. And this day shall be for you as a memorial, and you shall celebrate it as a festival for the Lord, as a Chag LaHashem. L'doroseichem, throughout all your generations, you shall celebrate it as an everlasting statute. So here we see very, very clearly that the Jewish people are commanded by God to have matzah eaten, unleavened matzah, eaten, ready for them to eat before the exodus from Egypt. So we just read the Jews had matzah not because the dough didn't have a chance to rise. The Jews have matzah because they were told by God, "Ushmartem es matzah," you should guard the matzah to make sure that on the Pesach Seder night you eat matzah. Black and white in the Bible. You open up on YouTube, it didn't post, but if you open up a Bible, chapter 12 of the book of Exodus, you'll see God tells the Jewish people to have a Pesach Seder on the night before the death of the firstborn, before they leave Egypt. And that's what they do. Not only that, well, let's stop over there. So that's the matzah didn't have. We had matzah not because the dough didn't have a chance to rise, but because we were already commanded to have matzah from before. Question number 2. It says that when they leave Egypt, the dough they have no provisions. Let's look further on now. Let's go look. Um, let's go look a little further in the text, and you're going to see something interesting. Text says, verse 34, the people picked up their dough when it was not yet leavened. The leftovers bound up. They picked up their shoulders. And then it says, verse 39, they baked the dough. I'm going to go to post here 1 second. Here's verse 39. And what does verse 39 say? Let me just post verse 39. Verse 39 says that the Jewish people left Egypt in such haste that they didn't have chance to make provisions. In fact, verse 33, which I didn't copy over there, says that the Egyptians urged the people to speed to leave the land very, very quickly because they felt they're all dying. So the Jews were in such a rush, and the Egyptians were harassing them and pressuring them so fast to leave Egypt. And the verse says that they just grabbed their stuff together with them. They baked the dough that they had taken out of Egypt, which was unleavened matzos, because they were driven out so fast they didn't have time to make provisions for themselves. What I just said is not my interpretation. That's exactly what the Torah says. My dear friends, the most obvious of obvious questions. What do you mean the Jews didn't have time to prepare for leaving Egypt? The Jews knew that they were going to be leaving Egypt that night. God came to Moshe 14 days before the Exodus. And God tells Moshe, they already had a whole year and all the 10 plagues. But God comes to Moshe 14 days before. And God says, tell the Jewish people to prepare a Pesach Seder because on the night of the 14th, they're going to put the blood on their doorposts and they're going to eat the matzah and they're going to eat the mar. And that night I will kill the Egyptians. And that very night I will take you out of Egypt. So the Jews had a full 2 weeks, as long as being quarantined. The Jews had a full 2 weeks to prepare for the exodus from Egypt. 2 full weeks to make bread, to make bagels and to make tuna sandwiches and lox and cream cheese and whatever Jews take with them. You ever heard of Jews going on an airplane? Not now. Now no more airplanes. But until 2 weeks ago, a Jew came on the airplane, have a bag of fishes and fish, and they're eating the whole plane stinks, and they're eating their silver foil. I travel. My wife makes me food, and Baruch Hashem. So what does it mean that the Jews were rushed out of Egypt so fast that the dough didn't have a chance to rise? They had 2 weeks advance notice. You ever thought of that question before? We always know that the Jews were rushed out of Egypt. The dough didn't have a chance to rise for them to make bread. They knew that they were leaving beforehand. I'll ask you another question, even more simple, more obvious. Is anyone familiar with how long it takes for bread, dough, to become chametz? You go to a matzah bakery, you'll see they have a big clock on the wall, a big timer. You have 18 minutes. The time that the rabbis estimate it takes for flour and the water from the moment that they meet, even without yeast. Yeast makes it chametz right away. But even if you have flour and water without any yeast, and you leave them alone, the flour and the water, once they become dough, will start to rise on their own, naturally. It's a natural process. So the rabbis estimated that it takes 18 minutes for the dough to rise. So I ask you a simple question. How long did it take for the Jews to gather from midnight? Midnight is when the death of the firstborn happened, and Pharaoh was running around in the middle of the night. Moshe, Aaron, where are you taking the Jews out of Egypt? From when the Jews are formally told they're going to leave Egypt. How long does it take all the Jews to gather from all over the land of Egypt to gather in in Sukkot, which is at the exit of the city, until eventually they leave? When they leave the land of Egypt, it's already day. It says that they leave Egypt during the daytime. Definitely much, much more than 18 minutes. Much more than 18 minutes. I mean, think about it. Who has kids? You ever cut your kids into the car? How long does it take to get your kids into their seatbelts, get their stuff, and then your wife remembers she forgot her, the key somewhere, and then your daughter remembers that she forgot her backpack? Come on. It takes 18 minutes to get my kids out of the house in the morning. The whole Jewish nation to leave Egypt, the dough that they took, let's assume that for whatever reason they did not make provisions. Let's assume that for whatever reason they had dough, and the dough didn't have a chance to rise before they left Egypt. But just the amount of time that it would take all the Jews to gather, to leave their homes, to take their suitcases, all the stuff that they packed, they're leaving for good. Yeah, to get their stuff, to go back and make sure that they turn the lights off, to travel to the city of Sukkot. Took a whole day. All the dough, by nature, scientifically, logistically, the dough became chametz. So what does it mean when the Torah tells us that the reason why we eat matzah is because they were driven out of Egypt so fast that it didn't have a chance for the dough to rise? It's a good question. It's like an obvious question. The story makes no sense if you think about it. And finally, I'll ask you one last question. Tonight there's only four, right? Manishtana has four questions, so I'll ask you one more question. Already, as I read to you, already before the Jews left Egypt, God explicitly tells the Jews that this eating of the matzah, I believe it was verse 19. Let's go back and look in the comments on Facebook. If you're on Facebook, you can see it. The Torah says, verse 17, and you shall watch ushmartem es hamatzos. You shall watch the matzah, meaning you should guard it to make sure that the dough does not rise, does not become chametz. And you shall celebrate it as a festival for the Lord throughout your generations. You shall celebrate it as an everlasting statute. Here we see, black and white, that God is telling the Jewish people before they left Egypt and before the dough didn't have a chance to rise, that for the rest of Jewish history, you will gather your children together for a Pesach Seder. You will all sit together as one, and you will eat the matzah that I'm commanding you to make tonight, pre-Exodus, at your very first Seder. So once again, I ask you the question I started off tonight's class with. When we eat matzah at our Seder, when we eat matzah, why are we eating matzah? Are we eating matzah because the dough didn't have a chance to rise? Or are we eating matzah because God commanded us to? Why are we? The Torah says you should eat the matzah because God's commanding us to. And yet, if you look in the Haggadah, and I was going to originally plan to do this when I get to this point in the Haggadah, if you look in the Haggadah, and I'll post this on the comments in Facebook and maybe on YouTube. I'll be less than 200 letters able to post it there too. You know what the Haggadah says? You know why we eat matzah on Pesach? We're sitting by our Seder. We pick up the matzah towards the end of the Pesach Seder, and we hold the matzah in our hands. And you know what we say? We say the following words. We say, Matzah zu sha'anu ochlim. This matzah that we are eating. Know why we're eating it? Al shumma. Why are we eating it? Because the dough of our forefathers did not have a chance to rise until the Holy One, blessed be He. I'm going to post it on YouTube here. Less than 200 letters. The matzah we eat it because the dough of our fathers did not have time to become leavened before King of all kings, Melech, Malachei, Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the King of all kings, came and revealed himself to the Jewish people, and he redeemed them. This is what happened. The Holy One, blessed be He, the King of all kings, comes to the Jewish people and He reveals Himself to them, and that's why we eat matzah. On YouTube as well. Let me share with you a beautiful. This is important. This is beautiful. It's important. It's life changing. This is Pesach. This is the soul of the matzah, the soul of the story. You want to know why we're celebrating Pesach? What you should have in mind when you eat matzah? Listen to this. Based on the Alter Rebbe teaches this, and the Rebbe in the very, very last mimer, the Rebbe said, called Matzah Zu, describes that there's two fundamentally different divine energies in two fundamentally different kinds of matzah. There is the matzah that the Jewish people ate at the very first Seder of Jewish history, which was a pre-Exodus matzah, a pre-divine revelation matzah. And then you have the matzah that the Jewish people ate after they left Egypt, where the dough didn't have a chance to rise. And that's the matzah that's post-Exodus. You see, although we were commanded to eat matzah for 7 days, and God writes in this very chapter 12 that the Jewish people for all future generations will have a 7-day holiday where they'll, for 7 days, they will eat chametz and they'll only eat matzah. The Jewish people that were living at the time of the Exodus were only commanded about that 1 day of eating matzah. They were not commanded about a 7-day holiday. They were given a 1-day command. So when the Jewish people were eating matzah before midnight, because the death of the firstborn happened at midnight. When they were eating the matzah before midnight, why were they eating it? Because God commanded them to. But there was no great divine revelation. As Haggadah says, there had not yet been the moment of Nigla Aleihem, was revealed upon them. Melech Malchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the King of all kings, the Holy One, blessed be Himself, should be revealed to them. And therefore, because they had not yet had this experience, it's divine revelation, Torah says, Ushmartem es hamatzos. They had to guard the matzah. They had to prevent the flour and the water from becoming leavened dough. It was a divine, or the process that had to be supervised and watched. However, at the moment of midnight was the greatest divine revelation ever. Was a revelation, we say elsewhere in Haggadah, was a revelation where God said that I myself revealed myself to kill the firstborns. Ani, who? It says God, it was me. Ani v'lei malach. I, not an angel. Ani v'lei saraf. I, not a saraf, another form of angel. Ani hu v'lei ach. It was me, nobody else. God Himself is revealed to the Jewish people. And that moment of revelation is such a great divine awareness in the universe that the dough can no longer become chametz. Can no longer become chametz. Because what is chametz? We already mentioned this last night. This is one of the most important points that we have to think about every single year when we eat matzah. The difference between chametz and matzah is the difference between ego and humility. Both chametz and matzah are the same flour and the same water. The difference is that the flour and water of the challah bread of the chametz fluffed up, it's full of itself, it's ego, it's bloated, and the same density, the same volume of flour and the water in the matzah is just flat. There's no airs to it. It's not haughty. It's not full of itself. It's humble. God can only be revealed on something which is humble, on something which is full of itself. On the place of ego, it says in the Gemara in Sait on page number 5, God says that a person who is so full of himself, who has such a high ego, God says there's no room for me to dwell with that person. I can't live, says God, with a person who's full of himself. And therefore, when there was a revelation of God, there was no longer an ability of the Jewish people, of the bread to become chametz. Meaning, metaphorically, the Jewish people were not able to become egotistical. How can you have ego? When you see God taking you out of Egypt, you can have ego. You can say, look at me, look at what I accomplished, look at who I am. I'm a big macher. You can't feel that for a second. Not for a second. And therefore, the Jewish people that left Egypt at that moment, when they witnessed unbelievable divine revelation of God, at the moment of the death of the firstborn, at the moment of midnight, there's no possibility for any chametz to be created. No possibility. Only humble, only humility, only matzah. We have the pre-Exodus matzah, the post-Exodus. These are called the pre-midnight matzah, the post-midnight matzah. Two totally different kinds of matzah. In fact, they're not even spelled the same way in the Chumash. In the Torah, when it describes the matzah that was eaten before midnight, when it says you should guard the matzah, the word matzah is spelled with a outer letter vav. It's spelled mem tzadik taf with no vav. Whereas the matzah that's described after midnight is spelled mem tzadik vav taf. It's spelled as matzah with the letter vav. What it mem tzadik vav taf. What does the letter vav symbolize? What does it signify? Vav is a day drying down. A little hook on the top and drying down. That's the matzah. The matzah of after midnight is the revelation of God. Therefore, it's spelled differently. But we can go further with it. Let me take you further. Let me explain to you something. First, I might ask you, telling me that the food that we eat impacts the level of humility and connection that we feel to God. You're telling me that the matzah I eat, if it's proper matzah, it has humility. The matzah itself is not able to become chametz. Let me ask you a more fundamental question. Why is it that we need to eat to begin with? Meaning, why did God create the universe that I, a human being, need to eat bread in order to survive? We know there's a totem pole in creation. There's inanimate objects called domim, rocks, table, etc. They don't grow, they don't have no life, they're dead. Then you have someach, which is vegetation. Above that, in the totem pole of creation, you have animals, the animal kingdom, and above that, you have the medaber, the human being, the person. Obviously, there's some level of life force that allows inanimate objects to exist, but it's a very, very minimal level of divine energy, so much so that there's no growth, no change, no energy to it. You have vegetation that obviously has life in it. It's growing, it's changing, so it has life, but it has no feelings, there's no pain. You have animals that have a much more sophisticated level of life and therefore much more sophisticated divine energy within them. And they have emotions and they can feel pain and they can feel love and they can emotionally connect with you. And then you have the people, human beings that are on another realm of their own. So why is it, I ask the question again, now in this paradigm, why would the human being, who is seemingly the highest level within creation, why would he be required to need a food from an animal, fish, milk, eggs, bread, salads, vegetables, and even inanimate objects like water? Why would he need that to live? In fact, water is the most important thing we need to live. I don't think it's available in any stores anymore, but you need water to live, and that's inanimate. You would think that it would be the other way around. We should give life to them, not them giving life to us. Don't we all have godly energy within us? So the Torah says, "Lo al halechem levado yichya adam," and not on bread alone does man live, but rather, why do we live? Not on bread do we live, but on the Matzah pi Hashem yichya adam. But on the word of God inside the bread do we live. Meaning, we all have divine word, divine energy within us. Every single creature has energy within them. However, there's a very different kind of divine energy within the lower levels of reality, within the inanimate object, within the vegetation, the animals, and then the person. These other levels of existence come from a world called Tohu, a world which I'm not going to explain tonight because it's really not the point of the class. But all that's relevant to know that it comes from a higher divine world called Tohu, and we come from a lower world called Tikkun, the world of rectification, Tikkun Olam. When something falls, that which is higher up falls further down from the wall, right? So you have a wall, this is the top, this is the bottom, and imagine when it's falling, the top falls further, which is top falls furthest away from where it started. So too, when God created the world, He first created a world of Tohu. Again, we're not going to explain it tonight. And those divine energies fell further down to the physical world than the divine energy of the human being who was created to do tikkun olam, to fix the divine energy that had fallen into the physical material of this world that we elevate through us eating. When we take a piece of bread and we make a blessing on that piece of bread, we are actually elevating and uplifting the divine sparks that come from a higher spiritual source than us ourselves. And therefore, by us elevating the divine energy that's within the bread, that in turn gives us life as well. I hope that I was clear on what I explained. I don't want to get too much into the details, as I said, because what I really want to explain is the matzah. The matzah. Let me just make sure I'm clear. Every day, today I had a tuna sandwich that my wife made for me. Thank you, Hannah. When I washed my hands for bread and I sat down to eat the bread and the tuna, at that moment, because I made a blessing and because I ate the food so I have energy to be able to prepare the class I'm teaching tonight and to be able to have energy to be able to be a good father to my kids, etc., etc. Therefore, I elevated the food, the sparks of energy that were within that bagel and within that tuna, and that divine spark of energy gave me nourishment as well. Now, the food that you eat impacts you. That's the well, you have to eat kosher food, not kosher food, etc. And the same is true regarding the matzah versus the chametz. When we eat bread, we're internalizing sparks of the tohu, of this higher world. But when you're able, but that has some danger to it. Like anything, the sparks of holiness that fall into the physical world, they're embedded within the physical, and it's easy to get lost in the you get lost in the forest when you're trying to cut trees. It's easy to get distracted by the physical that you're trying to uplift. Very often, what happens to us when we're trying to uplift food? Really, we should be eating the food because we need energy to be able to serve God, to do our jobs, to do our be a good parent, to be a good husband. Or sometimes, just sometimes, we get distracted by the taste. And we get distracted by we want better food and this kind of food and that food. And we begin to eat more as a glutton, more as as a temptation, as a desire, and as a need to satisfy our ability to exist. What happens then? Not only are we not being uplifted by the sparks of energy, the exact opposite, we're getting pulled down into unholiness. So matzah has this purity to it that has no ego mixed in. Matzah is a food that doesn't need to be separated. Matzah is automatically on a higher spiritual level, and therefore the person who eats it doesn't have to fight the same battle to reveal the holiness and the goodness that's inside that matzah. He's able to eat it and be elevated, uplifted. Talmud says that a child doesn't know how to say Abba, to say a father, to eat the wheat of bread. There's even more so with the faith that comes from the matzah, that just like in general, we need to eat in order to be able to think and understand. And it says that a child cannot speak until they eat food. How much more so when we're talking about the speaking of the soul, the speaking of the neshama, that in order for the neshama, the soul, to have faith in God, it needs to eat food that will nourish it. What kind of food will nourish the soul? Food that has nothing mixed in that's negative. A food that has no ego, no distraction from godliness mixed in. Regular bread has ego, metaphorically. Therefore, regular bread requires work to separate the good from the bad. Matzah has no ego. This is why in the Zohar and Kabbalah, eating matzah is called michla imhemnusa, food of faith, bread of faith. Why is matzah called bread of faith? Because faith, first of all, begins with humility. This is something that we've talked about already several times this week, and I'm going to mention it again. Because we're living in times that are very difficult. We're living in trying times where our faith is being tested, our emotional serenity is being tested, our ability to stay true to God without being able to go to show, without being able to prepare for Pesach the normal way is being challenged. And I know people that are they're losing it. They're stressed. They're panicked. They're worried. And faith means that I know that God's in charge. Faith means, or even more than faith, that we discuss trust in God, the real faith, not just abstract faith, but real faith that leads to action, which is what we call bitachon. Trust in Hashem is to be able to be humble, to be able to say, I accept. I saw as a side note, I wasn't planning on saying this, one of the people who I mentioned for Tehillim at the beginning of tonight's class is a very, very well-known teacher in Crown Heights. My kids have listened to story tapes that he said of a Goldstein. He's a older man. I'm not sure how old he is, but he's definitely the older category. And his name is Levi Ben Chana Priva. He's in the hospital. He's in serious condition. One of several rabbis that are in serious condition. And I saw a video of him from I'm not sure exactly when, so a few weeks ago, a few months ago, not in the last few days, but sometime recently, where he's sitting by for he's singing a song. I don't remember the words by heart, but basically, I accept whatever Hashem does is for the best. He takes me wherever I need to go. There's a beautiful song that came out recently. There's a variation to the words that was going around, not from the singer, but that I accept that, etc. The God knows what's best, and I'll share it afterwards. He's singing this because a person that's truly connected to Hashem, a person who's truly humble, a person who's truly there for what God wants, is able to accept whatever God gives him. And therefore, the matzah is the bread of faith. Now comes the key. Now comes the key. Sit down to our Seder table tonight, not tonight, in 3 weeks. And every single person who's watching this, I hope, will sit down to a Seder, wherever it may be, maybe with their family, maybe just their immediate family, not with their extended family at home, wherever it may be. And again, I promise any single person that needs matzah for Pesach, let me know. I promise to do anything I can to make sure you have matzah, shmura matzah, handmade matzah. Be my gift, a gift from our shul. Make sure that you have handmade matzah to eat, even if you're having a small seder, even if you're by yourself and not doing all the rituals. You're going to sit down, you're going to make a blessing on the matzah, you're going to thank God for giving it, you're going to eat the matzah. Why are we eating matzah in the year 2020? What matzah experience are we digesting? Are we eating matzah because there were Jews that lived in Egypt before the Exodus who were slaves, and they were commanded by God to sit with their belts on and their shoes on to eat the matzah and the maror and the Pesach offering in haste, to be ready with the blood on their doorposts, to be ready to run out and leave Egypt? Or do we eat matzah because we've experienced freedom? We've experienced the Exodus and the revelation of God that allows us to experience matzah experience God in a way that allows us to be humble and to connect to God in the way where God's very essence, the King of all kings, the Holy One, blessed He, is revealed before us. And so the answer is that although it is true that in the Torah we find the commandment of God that we should eat the matzah for all generations, which would seemingly imply that the reason why we eat matzah is because God commanded us to, and that's why we're eating matzah, to remember how the Jews ate matzah when they were in Egypt, as it says in the Torah, to dispel us of that notion. And by the way, before we dispel that notion, that's why we say in the beginning of the Seder, this is the poor man's bread, to remember the beginning of the story, how we were sitting in Egypt, this poor man, slaves, as I mentioned last night, who didn't have time to allow their bread to rise. They ate their matzah in a state of rushing to go back to work. Or we actually eat the matzah, or we're going to make the mitzvah. We pick up the matzah in our hands and we say matzah zusha anuochem. Read it in the comments. It's both on the YouTube and on the Facebook page. Read in the comments matzah zusha anuochem. This matzah that we are eating tonight in the year 2020. Why am I eating this handmade matzah? Not because once upon a time there were Jews who were slaves in Egypt. No, not because they're not. Well, we'll say not because there were slaves who were Jew. There were Jews who were slaves. No, we're eating this matzah because once upon a time there were Jews who experienced divine revelation, and they were able to witness the revelation of God performing wonders and miracles and taking them out of their slavery, taking them out of a seemingly impossible situation and redeeming them, making them into free people. And therefore, we eat the matzah to remember this divine revelation. Meaning, even though we're eating the matzah before midnight, but the divine revelation within it is a divine revelation of post midnight, post Exodus. That's why so we remind the fact that even though the dough did, what do you mean the dough? They asked the question, what do you mean the dough didn't rise? It took much more than 18 minutes for them to travel. Dough didn't rise because the dough was spiritually not able to rise. And when we are eating our matzah, we are remembering that when the Jews left Egypt, they were in such a state of spiritual elevation that they were eating matzah that was supernaturally unleavened. And someone commented in the Facebook comment before, the matzah that was not chametz when they left Egypt, it wasn't unleavened because the dough didn't have a chance to rise because not 18 minutes passed because they were rushing. The dough wasn't physically able to rise. The physical reality of their dough was physically unable to have ego in it. I repeat, the physical reality of the dough of the Jews that were leaving Egypt, who had seen such great divine revelation, was so powerful. The dough, the physical dough, couldn't rise. And when we're eating the matzah, we're remembering that the dough that our forefathers ate when they left Egypt didn't rise. It wasn't able to rise, not because they guarded and watched it, but as we say, the dough wasn't able to become egotistical. In fact, when we do the mitzvah today, says the Rebbe, it's even greater than the matzah of the Jews that left Egypt. Because the matzah that the Jews ate when they left Egypt, was a great divine revelation, but it was only a divine revelation. The matzah we eat today actually combines both parts. On one hand, we're doing it because it's a mitzvah, because God told us to, because we worked and made sure that the dough wouldn't rise. And yet simultaneously in that dough, we are being given a dosage of divine revelation, a dosage of divine inspiration that does not allow the dough to rise. This is why we must eat shmura matzah, because this matzah is the bread of faith. When we eat this matzah, we are eating a food that has been ingested and injected, rather, with divine revelation that does not allow for ego, that does not allow for a feeling of separation between us and God. It's a beautiful thought. And now I want to end with the most beautiful of beautiful stories. Hope I was clear. If there's any questions, you can send me a message afterwards. I'd be glad to discuss it. Beautiful, important message to understand about why we eat matzah. Not because the Jews were rushing, the dough didn't have a chance to rise. Because God was revealed, and therefore the revelation, the power, the physical matzah wasn't able to become chametz. And when we eat that, just like when we eat bread, it gives us nutrients to give us life to exist. And when we eat meat, to give us more nutrients. And we eat vitamins, and we eat vegetables. When we eat matzah, it makes us spiritually supercharged. So please, everyone that's watching, make sure that you eat the real matzah. I will help you. I will give you a gift. You should have real matzah if you need it. If you have a big family, I'll have pounds available to buy. I'll have gifts available for those that need, etc. Now for a story. This is one of my most favorite stories. I'm going to share with you a story about shmura matzah, and it is especially relevant to what's going on today with the coronavirus and the isolation and separation and difficult times in which we live. True story that happened in 1945. Rabbi Eliezer Zusha, Portugal was his name. He was a Skolner Rebbe. He was a great Hasidic master, Rebbe, from the city of Skolny. He was a survivor, obviously, was in the concentration camps. And towards the end of the Second World War, in Skolny, the city in northeastern Romania. The Skolny Rebbe from the city of Skolny was in northeastern Romania towards the end of the Second World War. March of 1945, he is liberated, and the very end of March is March 29th is Pesach that year. Sorry, they were liberated in April 1944. Sorry, they were liberated in April 1944. And coming March of 1945, it's going to be the first year that these Hasidim and all these Jews will be experiencing their first Pesach Seder of liberation. Can you imagine? It's a little under a year since their liberation. They're in DP camps. They're obviously in a very, very bad situation financially and logistically. Whatever they have is only the donations that they're receiving. They're getting different food items being sent from different charities. But the skull and their dad, the holy, holy Jew, who had not been able to eat shmur matzah when he was in the camps, decided that no matter what, he was going to do whatever he could to obtain wheat, that he could watch it, not just to get the machine matzah, but to be able to get real wheat himself and to supervise the process to make sure to bake proper shmur matzah. It was very, very difficult. They had just gotten out of the camps. They were in a very poor situation. He managed to get a hold of some wheat, and he took it and he watched it himself with his chassan with the supervising, and he made the matzah in all the right way, and he sent out a message to all the Jews in the nearby area that he had shmura matzah available, but because it was very, very limited, he was giving only 3 matzahs per house. For a family, you can come in order to be able to celebrate Pesach. You could come and get 3 matzahs for the different communities that were celebrating Pesach. Maybe not even per house, per community, per rabbi, per rebbe, and that was it. Week before Pesach, the matzah is ready, and the man comes down. His name is Rabbi Moshe Hager. Moshe Hager was the son of the Vishnitzer Rebbe. The son of the Vishnitzer Rebbe comes to the Skolner Rebbe's Gabbai. He's living in the city of Chernovich. He comes to the city of Chernovich to the Skolner Rebbe's house, and the attendant in charge of the matzah is there and says, "You got 3 matzahs." And then Moshe Hager says, "I refuse to leave without getting 6 matzahs." And the guy says, "Sorry, you don't get 6 matzahs. The rule is the rule. Everyone is getting 3." And Moshe Hager says, "I absolutely will not leave this room until I get 6. My father, the holy, saintly Vishnitzer Rebbe, insisted that he needs 6 matzahs, 3 for the first night, 3 for the second night, and he commanded me not to leave your house until I get 6 matzahs. I will not leave and go back home without doing what my father said. You will not make me leave without giving me 6 matzahs." You can imagine the man in charge did not like this. He starts to scream and shout, and they're shouting back. And the vision and the son of the vision Rebbe, the Moshe Hager, is shouting and saying, "I insist, I need to see the Rebbe. My father said if I see the Rebbe, I'll be able to get 6 matzahs." Finally, there's such a commotion that the skull and they're coming out of the other room. He comes out, and the son of the vision Rebbe, the Moshe Hager, said, "I insist. Father told me I'm not allowed to leave out 6 matzahs. I must get 6 matzahs." Back and forth, until finally Skull and the Rebbe is sitting in Chernovich, is sitting in poverty. He has very little matzah, but he's begging him. He gives him 6 matzahs, and he goes home. Imagine the gabbai, the attendant, is very upset at this man that forced the issue and got more he deserved. But what can you do? The Rebbe said, "Give him 6." They gave him 6. He left. Comes the morning of Pesach, the morning of the Seder. In a few hours is the Seder. And who shows up by the home? And who rocks up in the town and shows up by the home of the skull and the Rebbe? The Moshe Hager. Gabbai, the man in charge, sees this Moshe Hager there again. He remembers what happened the week before he starts. Already the blood starts to boil. He screams, "Get out of here. There's no more matzah left. Don't even think about it." It didn't come to get any more matzah. My father sent me with a very, very important mission, the Vizhnitz Rebbe. I need to see the skull in the Rebbe right away. Comes, he sees the skull in the Rebbe, and he asks the skull in the Rebbe, says, my father wants to know if you saved any matzah for yourself. My father wants to know if you have any more matzahs left. And the skull in the Rebbe becomes a little sad, and he says to the Moshe Hager, I tell you the truth. I was saving 3 matzahs for myself like anybody else. Saving 6 matzahs. Then I couldn't, then I gave away 3. So I had my last 3 matzahs. And yesterday, a family came to me. They were crying with poverty. They had absolutely nothing for Pesach. They didn't have anything. And I felt so bad for them. I gave away my last 3 matzahs. I have nothing left for myself. And with that, Moshe Hager goes into his jacket and he pulls out a package with 3 matzahs. And he says, my father, the Vizhnitz Rebbe, knew that you would be so loving to others that you would give away your last 3 matzahs. And that's why he insisted that I should take 6. 3 for him and 3 for you. I love this story. The scholar Rebbe was working and working for months, bending over backwards, doing everything he could to find the money to buy wheat, to supervise, to get a bakery, to get an oven. It was very difficult. They had just come out of the camps. They had just been liberated. This was their first Pesach and freedom. After all that work, finally gets matzahs, and he gives it all away. Gives it all away. He doesn't even keep 3 for himself. He's lucky the Vizhnitz Rebbe knew who the skull in the Rebbe was, and the Vizhnitz Rebbe took 6 matzahs, 3 for him and 3 for the skull in the Rebbe. My friends, we're living in scary times, and we're afraid, and we don't know what the future will bring. We don't know what will happen in a few weeks from now. We don't know what the world will look like. And so what happens, we go into self-preservation mode. And we go into panic mode. We start buying all the toilet paper in the supermarkets and buying all the hand sanitizer and all the cereals and all the water and all the gas. We don't even think we're just buying. Because we're all in self-preservation. We're doing what we can to take care of ourselves, and we need to take care of ourselves. Let's make sure that as we prepare for Pesach, we don't become so into ourselves like the chametz, and we don't pay attention to the needs of those around us. Let's make sure that the skull and the Rebbe, maybe don't give away your last 3 matzahs. Keep 3 matzahs for yourself. Make sure you find someone else who maybe has no Pesach plans. Help them. Help them with shopping. I have, thank God, a lot of volunteers that offered to go shopping. I don't have enough people to help. Now the volunteers should be, because thank God, many of the people I spoke to in the last few days, they already went shopping. They have what they need. Well, let's just as we get closer to Pesach, let's keep our eyes and our ears open for anyone that needs. Let's make sure Pesach, Matzah, divine revelation, that we're not so stuck in self-preservation, we forget the needs of the other. Let's make sure it's a matzah for ourselves and it's a matzah for you. My friends, good night. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay good. Bezrat Hashem, tomorrow night, 7:30 p.m. Thank you all for watching, being part of our virtual online community. Thank you for giving me the ability to teach so I can feel connected to you all. May God bless us. Will bless us. Everyone that we're praying for to be healthy. Everyone in the entire universe should be healthy. There should be no more illness in the world, only health and goodness of Mashiach, God willing, very, very soon. Good night, Laila Tov.